Welcome to the Great Basin Prescribed Fire and Smoke Transport Briefing for Friday, January 26th. Over the last 1 to 2 weeks, we've seen storms move across the Great Basin, bringing precipitation especially to the north, but also at times to far southern areas of the Great Basin. These areas in southern Nevada have been above normal for the last week or two. You can see the image on the right showing the last 2 weeks of percent of normal precipitation, and we've seen definitely well above normal precipitation in southern Idaho, northern Nevada into parts of northern Utah, and also into far southern Nevada. Some of the drier spots have remained western Nevada into parts of the Sierra foothills, and then also even parts of western and eastern Utah and the Arizona Strip, and up into central Idaho. Looking at the new snowfall over the last 72 hours, and we have again continued to have storms move through at times. This has brought some new snowfall to central areas of the Great Basin and even down south, where you can see several new inches of snow in parts of southwest and southern Utah. The snow depth is indicated on the right, and you can see, looking at the percent of normal, we are actually seeing closer to normal snowpack over parts of northern Utah, northern Nevada, and up into southern Idaho, but still some of our drier spots are below normal around the periphery of the Great Basin, especially in the Sierra, which is below 50%. Looking at our satellite loop from this morning, you can see a strong ridge of high pressure building into the west coast. There is still quite a large trough well off the west coast in the Pacific, which is generating quite a bit of cloud cover and pushing that into the spilling over the top of the ridge into the Great Basin. So we will see cloud cover across the Great Basin and even possibly some showers, but for the most part under this ridge of high pressure, generally lighter winds and much warmer temperatures. We will see temperatures up to 10 degrees or more above normal, especially over the western half of the Great Basin, and as this ridge progresses eastward, we will see those temperatures rise. We'll also see stronger inversions, especially in areas of new snowpack and new snowfall, so expect some air quality issues going through the weekend into early next week with this ridge. Currently, there are no watches and warnings from the National Weather Service in effect for much of the Great Basin. There is a dense fog advisory over parts of far western Idaho, but for the most part fairly quiet under the ridge. And you can see for later today that ridge moving slightly eastward and that moisture kind of pushing into the west coast, spilling over that ridge mostly in the form of cloud cover. Looking at the ventilation index on the right, under the ridge, you would anticipate lighter winds, so again, poor dispersion, and we will see those inversions really setting in going into the weekend. So for later today, we will see some gusty winds over far southern areas with the north to northeast winds on the east side of the ridge. Otherwise, somewhat gusty winds over far western Idaho in advance of the ridge, but for the most part lighter winds and generally lower mixing heights. Our temperatures, again, starting to climb. We will see highs in the 50s in the lower elevations of western Nevada and 60s down south. Still cooler temperatures further east as that ridge hasn't really moved eastward yet. Relative humidity, not really a big concern, generally above 30% with the exception of the far south. As we move into Saturday, that ridge pushes eastward, so we will see still some cloud cover again spilling over that ridge, and the dispersion still remaining quite poor in most areas. Winds will be generally dropping off across all areas of the Great Basin. Still some southwest winds around the top of that ridge in Idaho, but most of those gusts in the 20s, and generally low mixing heights. Temperatures continue to rise in all areas. We'll see valley locations even over eastern sides of the Great Basin in the 30s and 40s, and will even reach the low 60s in the far western side of Nevada. Relative humidity still remains above generally 30%, with the exception of southern Nevada. And moving into Sunday, that ridge still remains in place, probably a little bit less cloud cover than what we'll see today and tomorrow, especially over the western half of the Great Basin. Again, strong inversions, poor dispersion, so expecting air quality issues to really start to set in, and warming temperatures. So winds, really not much of an issue. Some scattered areas of possibly some breezy winds kind of around the periphery of the Great Basin, but certainly nothing significant. Mixing heights remain low. And temperatures continue to rise. We'll see temperatures really in most valley locations, at least in the 40s over the eastern and northern half of the Great Basin. And even in the higher terrain, we'll see some highs in the 40s. Otherwise, low to mid 60s over the western half of Nevada, and then upper 60s down south. No real change in relative humidity. As you can see from the precipitation, as that moisture spills over the top of the ridge, over the next couple of days, we'll see some light shower activity over far western Idaho, far northern Nevada, but for the most part, generally drier conditions with much of the precipitation in the Pacific Northwest. As we move into next week, that ridge continues to push eastward and really continues to dominate the Great Basin with those warmer and drier conditions and poor air quality and lighter winds. Tuesday, that ridge finally starts to move eastward, so we will see that ridge dominant over the eastern side of the Great Basin, again continuing to see these above normal temperatures and lighter winds. We are starting to see that larger trough off the west coast push inland, so starting to affect the Pacific Northwest and Northern California, and we will start to see possibly some winds pick up over far northwestern Nevada on Tuesday, but still generally lighter winds region-wide and poor dispersion. By Wednesday is really when we'll start to see the influence of that trough, so winds will start to pick up across Nevada. This will help clear out those inversions and improve our air quality. And again, the ridge remains over the eastern areas, so still another day of still warm temperatures and lighter winds and poor air quality. By Thursday, however, is really when the trough moves in. We'll see an increase in winds, clouds, and precipitation for many areas of the Great Basin. And then looking at our precipitation, this is just going from Monday through Wednesday, so still the early part of the week where we are dominated by that ridge. So again, no real potential for precipitation, with much of that off to the west. But the big changes come midweek. So by Wednesday through the end of the week, we will see precipitation. It looks like in all areas of the Great Basin, at least in some fashion, and could see some heavier precipitation even over southern areas that did see some recent precipitation, but largely across the winter have been not seeing as much precipitation as up north. So this will be good news for the Great Basin for bringing at least some precipitation to all areas. And we are still a week out, so we'll continue to monitor that as far as how heavy that precipitation might be. And the 7-day total precip obviously takes into account much of what's going on through the middle to late portion of next week, and then those lighter showers for the next couple of days in the north and west. The 8 to 14-day outlook, taking us from February 2nd through the 8th, shows cooler temperatures in the west, and again, a really strong signature for above normal precipitation, especially over the southern half of the Great Basin into Southern California and the Southwest. And this is more indicative of what we would typically see in an El Nino pattern. Again, we have been in El Nino for some time, but the weather pattern has been really dominated by other factors. So really not seeing that El Nino pattern, but it looks like this is definitely a little bit more classic signature for El Nino, and again, very strong above normal signature for precipitation in the south. That concludes our webcast for today. Check back on Monday for the latest updates.